Hello and welcome to LMD's World Environment Day 2024 panel discussion. The topic of today's discussion is land conservation, and we're hoping to talk about mitigating environmental challenges that are impacting Sri Lanka's ecosystems as well as communities. And I have with me an eminent panel today. I'll start introducing them from my left. I have Palinda Perera, the Specialist Corporate Responsibility at Rockland Distilleries. Palinda, thank you for being with us. Next, I have Shanez Wijesingha, the Vice President of Quality Assurance, Health and Safety, Sustainability and Data Privacy of Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. Welcome, Shanez. And then we have Rohan, Cooray, Climate Change and Disaster Management Specialist and Consultant to ADB. Thank you for being with us, Rohan. And last and not least, we have Jayantha Wijesinghe, Earthwatch WWF Climate Champion, who is also the co-founder at Rainforest Protectors of Sri Lanka. Welcome. Thank you very much, first and foremost, for being here, all of you, and hope to have a very good discussion with each and every one of you. The first question, I'm going to actually give it in general to the entire panel. I want to start off with the triple planetary crisis. Globally, we are increasingly talking about how this is intensifying. We're talking about the crisis of climate change, the crisis of nature and biodiversity loss, and of course, the crisis of pollution. Looking at the local picture, just to give our audience, a foundation for the rest of the discussion to follow, how does this triple planetary crisis play out in Sri Lanka? Palinda, because you are next to me, can I start with you?
At the moment, as you clearly mentioned, climate change, biodiversity, impacts on biodiversity, and the pollution. So if you break down three individuals into different sections, what do you feel when you be in Sri Lanka? Is that global warming, the current climates like havoc. But if I talk about one specific area, it could be the sea level rise, global warming making into melting polar ice caps, and then that getting into the current waters. So if we go back a little bit on the historical values, I would say in 1990s to about 2000, it was about 2 millimeters a year, and then from there onwards, another a decade will be 3 millimeters, and then now from 2010 to about 2023, which we have the last statistics, it's roughly about 5.5 millimeters a year.
That's
even though it's a small amount, a yearly base of that much of increase, the predictions might say when you talk about 2060 or so on, it will be about 7 inches. So that's strange. And then what do we get out of that when you have the rising sea level rise? You have the coastal ecosystems, coastal environments, coastal communities, which has been affected badly. And then not only that, seawater intrusion into the waterways, having another devastation, because we are an agricultural country, that will be affected. Utility of water, you can't use saline water in the long term for daily use, so that might also affect. And then the issues which we are currently facing, we have had heat waves, we have had floods, so that's also in terms of climate change being present in the current conditions. And if you talk about biodiversity, we have so much of biodiversity loss in terms of forest cover depletion. We also chop down forests, unfortunately, for development. But if it is sustainable, you can do something in mitigating the climate change and the impacts. And also, when you reduce the forest cover, it also affects the biodiversity, the species. We have threatened species, critically endangered, and vulnerable. So those are sometimes they are only found in the country. So if they go extinct, that might be another issue. So the third part is the plastic and the pollution. We know riverine ecosystems, the coastal areas are totally flooded by pollution, non-biodegradable pollution specifically. You have biodegradable pollution where it's also a responsibility of the corporates to buy back what you put out, but isn't it again the responsibility of the consumers? So that's a connection, because we talk about, sometimes we talk about extended producer responsibility, but isn't that also responsibility of the consumers? So that I'll park it there as the moment, and then maybe we have a lot of things which is compiling up with the triple planetary crisis, and none of them are broken into separate silos. It's all interconnected. So you can't remove one in terms of the other.
Thank you, Palinda. That was a good introduction. Rohan, can I ask you what your thoughts are on this? How do you see the triple planetary crisis in Sri Lanka?
Well, let me just contribute what Palinda has started. Well, since my background is climate and also I'm a scientist, so I look at the things in scientific way because we need evidence to prove what we are saying here. Because that's something that we should not use the words loosely, because otherwise we will be in trouble, because we are trying to unpack the problems to identify the solution. It may be not the perfect solution, but it may be the solutions that we can withstand and combat the triple planetary crisis. Now let me come back to the crisis, the three crises that we were facing in today. It's globally, not only a Sri Lankan context. Well, of course, we do understand there is a interconnectivity between climate change, biodiversity losses, as well as the environmental issues such as pollution and air pollution, water, and etc. So these are all well interconnected. But let me come back to climate change, because that's something that we all live in one planet. There is no other planet for us to live. I don't know in future also. So we need to understand the planet that we are living in. It's Earth. So Earth has survived for millions of years. But within the last 150 years, it's changing its course. So we all discuss about the climate change in terms of last 150 years. So we are the group of people or the generation that facing the crisis, not the future. We are the people who are facing the problem. So let me come back again. Now, when we say climate change, of course, there are two major essentials or the climate variables that we say need to be understood. One thing is temperature, the other thing is rainfall. These two are blessings. These two are not a problem. We need water, we need rainfall, we need temperature, because we need to survive. The planet Earth survives because of these two variables. So you need to understand perfectly, and how this system, the Earth system, support our own benefits. I mean, we are living because of those two variables. Not only us, it's the environment, the biodiversity, all the living things in planet Earth live because of rainfall and temperature. So now what has happened since 1860? Of course, we do proudly say that we invent the engine and all those machinery things. Of course, we call it industrial revolution. But since industrial revolution in 1860, now we are changing the course of the planet Earth system. Of course, it supports us in many ways. It supports our consumerism patterns. It's changed our development. Of course, we do understand we need to develop, but we need to understand the triple climate boundaries as well. So up to what level we can go. So are we now surpassed the boundaries? Are we closer to the boundary? We need to understand. So let me just continue my inputs. I'll continue with my inputs on during the discussion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. I think that gives us a very big wake-up call and also sets the foundation right. I'm going to turn the attention to land because that is the overarching theme of this year's World Environment Day. Jayantha, if I ask you, we talk of land degradation, and like Palinda and Rohan covered, everything is interconnected, so we can't look at one in silo. But if we focus a little bit on the state of land and the state of land degradation in Sri Lanka, what are your observations?
Thank you very much, especially thinking of discussing the triple planetary crisis and the World Environment Day, the environmental conservation. I think this is high time that all of us, including the business community, the government, institutions, and general public all together start understanding the depth and width of the issue. When it comes to land degradation or desertification, and deforestation that we speak of in Sri Lanka is a huge issue. If I may begin, if we look at the time the British arrived in Sri Lanka, I would say early 1800s, our forest cover was about roughly in the range of 80 to 85%. And they basically wanted to promote coffee and tea and all of the other so-called monoculture, which some of which are actually now our economy is depending on. But for tea and coffee itself, we lost about 35% of our forest cover by the time the British officially left in 1948. And that's within about 2 centuries, we've lost about 35% of our forest cover roughly there. And this forest cover, mind you, is the most important forest cover that our ancestors, our kings, never touched. We were able to build Sigiriya, one of the world's wonder. We had 33,000 roughly around 30,000 irrigation tanks, cascade systems, not 30,000 cascade systems, but altogether 30,000 tanks and cascade systems. And then we had one of the world's best hydrologic civilization ever existed. And those kings, for so long, thousands of years, had all these technologies, never started building, never tried to build reservoirs in the hills or cut down our forests, because they've understood all the rivers would survive, all the water will come to these low-lying areas to fill up the reservoirs only if the central hills existed. And now what happened is that we cut 35% by 1948, and since 1948 to date, the Kalusuddas, if not our people, we have cut almost close to that amount within 70 to 75 years.
Another 30%.
Another 30 to 35%. Now, if you look at the actual forest cover in Sri Lanka, it's roughly about 17% if you look at the real numbers. But one thing we can be happy about is that we have close to 30% of a protected area network. Now, this is misunderstood as our forest cover. It's not our forest cover. Even the government claims our forest cover is 29.6. That's not true, because that stat was generated in 2008. And we know even then how that was done is not that accurate. And thereafter, when the civil war was over, all the so-called development, resettlement, industrial development, ports, airports, everything, and highways, all that got started. So now we are in a situation that we actually have a very limited forest cover compared to the countries of our size in the region and out of our region. Our forest cover compared to those countries in terms of the land size is very, very small. And that too is now at a huge challenge. We have a big threat of lot of deforestation and degradation happening because of either agriculture, unproductive agriculture, and various industries coming up, lot of mining projects are coming up, and even to the level, some of the good projects which are like renewable energy projects, which are good, like solar power is good, but if you put up a solar power plant by cutting 500 acres of forest lands, that's not going to be sustainable. So land degradation and deforestation is huge in Sri Lanka, despite all the policies and promises and indices and SDG goals that we speak of.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the statistics. Scary, but true. From your answer, I have so many questions coming up, but I think I want to talk about how land degradation and deforestation impacts ecosystems as well as communities. If we start with communities first, Shanez, I was hoping to address this to you. Yes. We often find that, like Jayantha was saying, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of development, but we find that the people who actually suffer as a result of land degradation are often the poorest in society, the rural communities and the smallhold farmers, which seems a little unfair.
Yes.
Can you share some insights on this?
Most certainly, Rohangi. I think the statistics that Jayantha shared is absolutely shocking. And we all know that right now the Sri Lanka forest cover is definitely less than 30%, 29, 25%. We really don't know the exact number, but we all know it's a low percentage. So why has this happened? It's mainly because forest land has been made available for other users, including vegetation, etc. But with this, who's the first to be hit hard is, of course, the rural communities, the small crop farmers, and, of course, the extremely poor, right? And how do we know this? Is because we see that there is the poverty index levels, I believe, has risen, and we have less crop in terms of yield, and soil fertility, there are problems being brought out. So there are definitely issues, that are prevalent in Sri Lanka. I really believe that private sector has a role to play in all this. Whilst we all can discuss how big the problem is, the private sector definitely needs to step in and step up the game, right? And from reforestation efforts to good agricultural practices like greenhouses, gap farming techniques, ecotourism, and also awareness is something that private sector needs to take on. As Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts, we had a very strategic project concerning farmers, and this was during the economic crisis, during the COVID times, where the farmers were having trouble with their crops, etc. And it was noted that financing and giving them the right techniques was definitely of something in need. So we invested in 27 farmers across Sri Lanka with good agricultural practices, and we saw great results. So definitely private sector must step in and step up.
Thank you, Shanez, for starting that, giving a spark to that very important part, very important stakeholder, the private sector. Palinda, can I get your views on how, because like you said, and like Rohan was telling us earlier, we can talk about the problem, but it's more important to talk about the solutions. Looking at this particular stakeholder, the private sector, how do you think that they should step up?
So I'll add a little bit to what Jayantha mentioned. Now we've been seeing 30% reduction like some long time before, but if you see the statistics at the moment, like taking from 1990 about to 2010, we've lost about 20% of forest cover. That's like really close distance, and then the definition has changed. Now the forest cover was defined in a different way than what it was mentioned, and then you suddenly see that the forest cover has grown, which might be interpreted in a different way. I'm not addressing that definition change, but we see the forest cover is quite a good substantial amount, but is it so?
We're fooling ourselves.
So is it so is another question to address. Coming to corporate sector, okay, we do sustainability, we involve in different corporate responsibility activities, corporate social responsibility, corporate responsibility. What I would see even in restoration phases, if you talk about restoration per se to increase our natural resources, are we doing the right restoration? Because in terms of corporates, sometimes you will be thinking, okay, you want to restore 20 acres, 100 acres of forest, 100 acres of mangroves, and then you go instantly plant trees and then forget about it. Is that right? Because we as Rockland, and then our sister company Olu Natural Mineral Water is also investing on cloud forest restoration. I'm just giving you an example. So for that we are interconnecting a forest, fragmented forest, which is next to the Horton Plains National Park's buffer zone. So we can't connect the forest to forest. It takes a long time. But we studied the property for 2.5 years. Sometimes management might be wondering why I'm not doing the restoration than just studying. But if you don't do the studying properly, you should not be doing the restoration. Sometimes when you plant mangroves, you look into Mahakadal, Rhizophora micronata. Is it right? you need to increase the diversity. It's not just one species, or it's not just planting per se. When you think about forest cover increase, everyone will think about me and kumbuk. Is that right? So you need to incorporate the values, and you need to study the property beforehand, and then me and kumbuk does not belong into other areas which is not their territories. So you need to study the ecosystem first, then understand what the dynamics are, and then maybe assist the natural regeneration. Assisted natural regeneration is what you can do as corporates. So it's not just terrestrial ecosystems, it's also marine ecosystem. You might be interested over coral conservation, seagrass, mangroves, so on, but trust me, do not do the restoration first if you do not study. That doesn't say that you can't, but get involved. There is Jayantha, there is other organizations, there's universities. Get the experts to do the study and wait until they give you the results. Go behind them, find it out, and then do a proper study and then proper restoration. Sometimes what you do is, you might think that there is a necessity of restoring, but the natural ecosystem might be sustaining some other resources which is needed for us. So if you do plant some trees, that might grow, but that might destroy the ecosystem which is existing, and then sometimes the natural balance could be cycles, water cycle, air purification, all the things might be disturbed by what the things you do. So you, as corporates, it's always good to do activities, but as responsible corporates, do it with the statistics. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Palinda. Rohan, yes.
Yeah, I think let me just come back again to this land degradation. Now in land degradation in Sri Lanka is driven by two different things. One is, of course, climate drivers are behind it. The other one is non-climate drivers. Now what you have speak here is more like non-climate drivers, which is anthropocene. Like these are all human interference. We are changing. We are converting the land use from one to one, another aspect. So this is what is happening in all over as Jayantha says. Of course, we were never a plantation society. We were a hydraulic society. We were always based on water. Our society is based on irrigation systems. We were never touched the uplands and things like that, because we always, of course, I do like when Jayantha says that we need to look at the water tower. The water tower is the central highlands of the country, which we call water tower, because that's where we get all our water. It's like the central water tank.
Yes.
So if you do something to the central water tank, whoever lives in the coastal areas or the low-lying areas will be affected. So that's what is happening. So let me come back again to this, the land and the climate change and the issues which driving the degradation as well as the deforestation and also reducing the land productivity. Now those things need to be discussed. Of course we need to, and also I will come back to Palinda's point that of course I do like when you should not plant trees based on some campaigns. Of course I do love to have trees everywhere, but that doesn't make, or that does not contribute to the ecosystems that we are speaking, because we have already altered the ecosystem. Now we are trying to brace, it's because we think, because we are guilt in a way, say okay, because we have we need to do something for the future generation, let's plant trees. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, I too love, but you need to remember now one of the major issue major contributor to climate change is carbon emission. We are removing the existing carbon stocks, that is biological, biotic carbon, as well as the abiotic carbon, which is extract from the fossil fuels. So you have, of course, now biotic carbon cycle is always there. It has its own imbalances, plus and minuses, but the fossil extracted carbon, or what we call is new carbon, is the issue. Now that's the carbon that is going beyond the threshold levels. So having a tree plantation campaign does not able to absorb or reduce the new carbon, because it takes time. It cannot be absorbed within 10 years. It's millions of years of process. You cannot just okay, it's good that you plant trees in cities. Of course, by profession I'm a chartered town planner as well. I love to have these urban agriculture, urban forestry, but I sometimes say, no, you cannot have a forest in a city. You can have a greenscapes, but that doesn't mean you are trying to, of course all these things contribute to absorb the carbon, the excessive carbons, but you need to understand how are we going to solve the problem by giving a solution which is not going to be a maladaptation practice, because we always tend to give solution based on our context, but those practices and the solutions will become a maladaptation practice in future. Now we think having supporting rehabilitation, a tank cascade system, or providing tree and forest plantation will support and reduce the carbon emission, and it will to a certain level it will try to balance the ecosystems, but I'm pretty sure it won't. You need to think beyond the frameworks. Of course I do like corporate social responsibility activities, but that doesn't mean that you need to also, but I really love when Palinda says, of course, get the experts, study first and then apply, because without studying, applying something will definitely become a maladaptation practice. So I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. Jayantha, talking about the experts, I would like to look at what Palinda and Shanez were talking about, like how the private sector gets involved in this. How should they look at balancing everything? I know it's an impossible question to answer, but how can we ensure that there is a balance in what we do so that nothing contradicts the natural?
Yeah, it's a very complex issue. Like Rohan mentioned, we are looking at fossil carbon that have been there millions of years, which we take out, and then we emit all this carbon. And then you have the biotic carbon, the carbon that's absorbed by the forest and all of that, which keeps this CO2 balance in the atmosphere. One thing we don't realize is with the atmospheric carbon dioxide balance, there goes the other balances of other gases, including oxygen. Now, for us to be in our right mind, right senses, there has to be a certain percentage of oxygen that has to be there. With what Rohan said about reforestation and trying to do restoration and all of that, what we do is that actually we are contributing to this balancing work. So in that sense, whilst I understand that a little bit of reforestation or restoration might not have a significant impact in terms of carbon budgets or what we have to achieve, it basically helps. So in that sense, it's a good thing. So we need to encourage whoever who's trying to do it right. Like Palinda said, do it right. Find the right place, find the right species, do it in a right way so that will contribute in a positive way. I know I don't know if it's okay to mention the company. There is one corporate strategy of a company that I know of in Sri Lanka, an apparel sector company, is that they want to either conserve or to restore 100 times of their factory footprint, a company with large factory footprint, which is very good because you have a land footprint that you're using. Similarly, you have an energy footprint, you have a water footprint, and you have carbon footprint. You have a lot of footprints which you are actually almost literally consuming free. And if you're consuming free and you need to give it back, you are indebted. Like if you go to the market and buy an oxygen cylinder, how much would you have to pay? But you're breathing now, you're taking out oxygen, you're not paying anything. Where does that oxygen come from? And if it's a company that extracts water in a big way, you're taking out water, it could be groundwater that you're exhausting. And are you paying for it? You're not paying for it. Tap water, yes, you may be, but in most cases, the groundwater that the companies are exploiting in this country, they are not paying. So you're taking it out free. Where does that water come? These ecosystems, these lands that we are talking about, the forest ecosystems, marine ecosystem, coastal ecosystems, are the ones that are giving us this. So you need to give it back. And the agriculture that we speak of, the NPK, other than the NPK that we are adding externally as fertilizer, that's given from the soil. And where does that NPK and that whole process of soil ecology happens? You need to give it back. So this is where companies need to look at their footprints, all kinds of footprints, and look at what they're consuming and the actual economic value, or if not, if you monetize it in the market values, not like the water that you might maybe take free or 2 rupees per liter, but the actual market value of a liter of water bottle would be about 100 rupees, 150 rupees or something like that. You put numbers and you have to look at the resources that we as individuals and as companies are consuming and we are not paying for, and for that you need to give it back, and the giving back is what the companies should do, whether it's land restoration, land conservation. You don't have to reforest. You know, we also have a land trust. I'm not going to talk about it, but if you need to actually protect 100 acres of a forest that is going to get cut next month, that's something that you can do. And there's so much of other things. You need to look at your, like Rohan very correctly said, one very important thing is that you, like net zero, going net zero, you can increase your emissions by 2030, double your emissions, and at 2030 you can make it net zero by buying up another forest somewhere or doing something so-called CES, but you have increased your emissions. Now you need to look at your current existing emissions and reduce it. If it's impossible to make it zero at this moment, but you need to really look at reducing the pollution of environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanez, I would like to...
That was very, very interesting, Jayantha. I couldn't agree with you more, right? And just on emissions, I think every corporate needs to have mechanisms to measure what their carbon footprint is. And it's a must, especially scope 1, scope 2, and we must start getting into scope 3. Now, that's going to be a challenge. How do we do this? Maybe the knowledge is not freely available, but as a nation, I think we need to understand these things and, start measuring right. We can say we want to be net zero by 2040, right? 2050, I think we've said 2040. 2040 is not long way off, right? So just reducing our dependency on some of these natural resources is something that we need to plan out. We need to allocate our resources on. Very, very important as a corporate sector, because it's time that we start conserving and protecting what we have for the future generations. Yeah?
Shanez, thank you very much for that, because you paved the way to my next question. We've been talking about the corporate sector and the responsibility, that they have to take up. But if I bring into focus another big stakeholder, I would say the government. What kind of role are they playing, and what should they be playing? I will pose it to everyone.
Well, I'll take the question because it's very okay. Now we need to understand again the climate change, the triple planetary crisis, in terms of the governance. Okay, we need to understand the governance of how we are going to address the three issues, the triple planetary crisis. Now, for an example like Sri Lanka, now we need to understand, do we have legal, policy, institutional, coordination, and as well as the implementation mechanism to achieve the solutions that we are going to implement in next couple of years. So do we have right legal framework? Do we have right policy framework and institutional coordination and implementation, as well as the climate financing? The financing is also part of implementation, because without financing you may not able to implement and achieve all your targets. You may have lots of ambitious plans and frameworks and targets and international commitments. Now Sri Lanka is a signatory to Paris Climate Agreement. In 2016, the government of Sri Lanka even ratified. They have a mechanism to implement. There are 4 things they are looking at. One is the adaptation, the mitigation, and also the loss and damage mechanism, and also the means of implementation. Those are the 4 areas that the government is looking at present. But having said that, now, or having all these legal, policy and institutional and all these frameworks, are we on the right track? That's something that we need to understand. Now we need to discuss, okay, of course, the other thing that I need to emphasize here in this discussion also, we need to understand climate change is not an environmental issue. You need to be very clearly understand this. Climate change is not an environmental issue. Climate change is an output of unresolved problem of development. Climate change was there, and the natural climate change was there. It is the life system of the planet Earth. But we have altered the system. We have extracted. So remember, I saw many discussions, the experts are discussing about climate change, and some people are mixed up with climate change impacts with climate emergency impacts. Now we need to look at, now even in this discussion I saw you want to discuss about the drought resilience. Of course we need to understand drought in terms of climate emergency as well as an output of climate change. Of course the countries like Sri Lanka, I was in Africa for many years and when we discuss about the climate change and the drought, I was in East Africa, and there were some meteorological guys who came with me to Sri Lanka, and we had a discussion with the meteorological department, and they were saying, and we were nicely presenting, we have dry zone, wet zone and intermediate zone. Of course we don't have a red zone, it was a misconception, so we have now not discussed about the red zones in Sri Lanka. We don't have a red zone, so remember that. So when our guys were our meteorological guys were presenting that, we were saying that our dry zone is experiencing annual rainfall of 1,000 millimeters, and they were laughing at us, the Africans. 1,000 millimeters of rainfall per annum cannot be considered as dry zone. Of course, it's a problem of water resource management. It's a problem of water. Jayantha was saying there was a 30,000 plus irrigation tanks, ancient irrigation systems. But of course, I'm not saying that we need to rehabilitate all these systems, because it cannot be done, because it was there in the ancient times, but now we cannot rehabilitate all the 33. It is not practical, and it's not contribute to what we are expecting. So that's it. But now what I want to say is now let's come back to drought. Now, most of our land are drought prone. Wet zone is smaller, and wet zone is getting more wetter, and the dry zone is getting more dry in future, but with an increasing rainfall pattern. You need to remember, increasing rainfall with a highly erratic rainfall trends. That's the important thing that you need to. It doesn't say that we do not have rainfall in future. No, we will have rainfall, but with highly erratic pattern, and that's need to be understand. So when we say drought, we need to also understand, do we have agricultural drought, or do we have a climatological drought, or do we have a hydrometeorological drought, or is it a socio-economic drought? In early history, there were like 4 famine occurred in Sri Lanka. Of course, these are not called as climate impacts of climate change. Now, I will come back to those 4 famines: Baminithiya Saya, Eknalia Saya, Buluka Saya, and there is another one. I couldn't remember the exact single term. So there were like 4 famines. Famines is because of drought. Because and remember, when you say drought, it comes back to us, it bounces back to us, because we will be worried about food security. Because at the end of the day, we are doing everything to get our harvest and everything. At the end of the day, everybody wants food. We need to look at the food systems are secured in future. So why I'm saying is, when we say about drought, our staple food is rice. The production is come from the dry zone. Of course, it does not produce as it was, but it has been reduced. But we need to understand why it is reduced. Is it because of the land use changes or our own issues, or is it because of the soil fertility is reducing, or is it diminishing? We need to understand this. So now let me come back again to the government. Is the government is doing? Yes, of course, government has its own mechanisms which are trying to address these issues, but in silos. Now, for an example, we do have many line ministries, departments, agencies focus on food security, focus on irrigation, focus on disaster management, focus on early warning and forecasting of rainfall and temperature, etc. and etc. So likewise, we have different departments. But the issue is, we have a very good vertical coordinations, but horizontal coordination among these agencies are very weak. So that has been identified by the government, not by anyone else. They also identified, but because why we need to understand these horizontal coordination, because sometimes, now for an example, let me take another example. Now in last year in Udawalawa, reservoir was dried out, and even the Samanala reservoir, which is dried out. So therefore, about like 1,000 acres of paddy lands were destroyed or failed. Their cultivation season was failed. Now, what was the problem there? It's an issue of conflict of competing interests among the water users. We need water for hydropower. We need water for agriculture. We need water for drinking. So, and also we need water for ecosystem services. Of course, to balance the biodiversity, and they also need the elephants and all these animals. Of course, not only the elephants, the micro animals. But do we have the right policies in place, or do we have conflicting policies in place? Now, for an example, I know we have a climate change policy, we have agriculture policy, we have a national environment policy, we have a land use policy, we have like, you name it, we have like energy policy, we have a national physical plan and policy, we have a water policy, we have a housing policy, we have urban policy, we have policies. But these policies are not interconnected. There are issues which we need to address. But of course, in order to address these issues, we need to have a wider stakeholder consultation process. We need people from the private sector. We need people from the financial sector. We need people from the academia, the think tanks. We need civil society perception on this policy preparation process. So that has to be done. So the consultation is one of the things that is missing here. So I do believe the government will take necessary action in future to address. Of course, I do understand the climate change bill is going to be present very soon, and well, we need to understand what exactly it's going to be focused on. But those things are coming. But I sometimes, in my personal opinion, I say having too much red tapes will collapse the system. And also I always say structures on structures will also collapse the system. You may have enough structures, you may have enough systems, you have enough legal regulation plans, but you need to have that coordination. And also, I like the word that Jayantha used, enforcement. Of course, it's not only enforcement, we need to identify implementation arrangements and the finance. So that's my initial reaction, how the government involved in reducing or addressing the climate change and the triple planetary crisis in the country. Of course, there are a lot of things they have done. We have to appreciate what they have done, but in the same time, there are a lot of things to be addressed. Thank you.
Jayantha, I think you can add to this.
I'll be as brief as possible. Just a few things. I need to give companies the credit, the corporate sector the credit globally, being more innovative and advanced in terms of going for net zero goals, like going for 2030 net zero goals. A lot of companies are there. Some of the Sri Lankan companies are actually going there, which is very good. But also at the same time, we need to be very conscious of the fact that if you look at all of these degradation, land degradation, deforestation, desertification, currently is happening also because of our corporates. If you look at the plantation company, if you look at the agricultural companies, big agro companies in the country, and the big agrochemical companies in the country. And if you look at some of the companies that have big infrastructure, the companies that are using forest landscapes, the companies that are trying to grab aquaculture landscape, the coastal ecosystems right now for aquaculture, shrimp farming into that and all of that. Recently, Bedditalti was degazetted based on a company's request, a company I don't want to name, but these are companies that are getting thousands of acres degazetted for their benefit. And if you look at the corn companies, the oil palm plantations, to most of these companies are eventually also contributing in a heavy way for deforestation. If you look at some of the areas such as Yalav, Kumana, and then Vilpattu area, some of these dry zone landscapes, there are companies who are going ahead with various different, whether it could be Tom Jay-Z mangoes to that and these. You see a lot of companies using the politicians and the available infrastructure to grab these lands. Now the cement corporation lands in Vanathavillu and in Puttalam area, and from Puttalam to Thalaimana now, we have the Adani wind power project coming, we have a lot of mineral mining projects are coming in Mana, and we have a lot of coastal shrimp farming and aquaculture projects coming there, and then you have loads of different agricultural and some projects we don't even know. Thousands of acres of lands have been grabbed by companies in Vanathavillu and beyond. Vanathavillu is in Sri Lanka one of the notorious divisional secretariat area for a lot of companies to go and grab lands. I'll finally come to Muthurajavela, just close to Colombo. Look at the amount of logistical facilities of export companies and local FMG manufacturers in Muthurajavela. What are those lands? Those lands are wetland lands that they are illegally occupying. Some of the countries that speaks of so much of sustainability, being green and all of that have set up their facilities. I'm not saying this is also the fault of the government. That is where I want to come. While some of the companies are doing a great job in going net zero and ensuring that their factory footprint is kind of addressed, and a lot of restoration projects and all of that. Some of the companies are at the extreme end, and they are working with some of the loose systems, whether it could be loose policies, legal frameworks, institutions, and the government's inability of really enforcing and enacting and having the institutional infrastructure working to ensure conservation is a big problem. So finally what I have to say is that, like Rohan said, we have CPP, Climate Prosperity Plan, which is the President's vision, as it says. And we have the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, that we have promised after COP21. Since 2016 to date, we have passed half the time, and we are only doing adaptation plans to that term. We are still planning on how we kind of go there, and we still have only less than 6 years to achieve these so-called targets. And then we have the net zero 2050 pathway of the government, and then government and the president's side comes and says that we want to advance for 2040, and then all the plans have to change once again. So these are kind of duplicity of, you have the act, the Climate Change Act coming, Reforestation Act coming, fantastic pieces of legislations, documents, policies being drafted. But the issue is that we don't have a right institutional infrastructure and the right people in place. When you look at how some of these ministries and the ministers are appointed, chairmen and director generals of these institutions and environmental regulators appointed. You look at some secretariats which are important, who are leading them. It's for me personally, this is for me personally, not the whole, probably not the opinion of the whole panel, is very disappointing. And I don't know where we are going, and I don't know by 2030 what we could achieve other than probably energy sector, which we will go for like 70% of a renewable energy if the plans in place happens the way they are planned. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayantha. We're going to take a very short break now, but we'll soon be back to restore our conversation on land restoration and conservation.
We are natives. We know the land, its wildlife, and its community like the back of our hand. We know that clean energy doesn't just minimize our carbon footprint. It can even show us a future of coexistence between man and elephant. We understand that planting trees in degraded lands grows more than a forest. Planting produce in our backyards makes home-cooked meals better. And helping others do the same can transform lives. Much like planting rattleweed can transform gardens, we do our homework. There are places that need more attention and care. To protect biodiversity in those places, we treat our oceans with respect. We treat our rainwater and used water with reverence. And we treat each other with real compassion. Sometimes the littlest things tell the biggest story. The sweetest story. Stories we all want to hear and feel. Innovation can truly be anything. It can be as simple as turning coconut leaves into roofing covers, steel pens into cattle enclosures, broken umbrellas into beach bags, and old linens into batik essentials. However, the unseen bigger picture is an even simpler one. Everything comes down to knowing the land, its wildlife, and its community like the back of our hand.
Welcome back to the discussion. We're talking about land conservation for World Environment Day 2024. So many talking points, but I'm going to focus on one particularly. You spoke of innovations and companies using innovative methods to, help with land restoration and all that. Technology is one way that we can be innovative and it's revamping life as we know it. But are we adequately using technology? Is there room to grow, especially from the corporate sector? Are we really using this pillar?
Thanks, Rohan, for the question. I think there's definitely room to grow. There is, for example, if you take AI technology now, there is early warning systems to actually predict how much the land degradation is in motion. Then there's also geographical information systems. Now, I can talk a little bit about geographical information systems because our Maldives resorts, in Cinnamon Maldives resorts, we use the technology to really understand how each of the locations, and we derive ecological maps pertaining to same. And as a result, we know, the habitats, the land composition, etc. So we can see that technology is available. It might be a bit costly, but I think this technology should be available somewhat in an affordable manner for for the rest of the sectors, and education of it must be in place, because it's highly scientific. I'm looking at the scientist. And we need the help of experts, because whilst private sector can have the vision and the goals and the right intentions to do it, I believe it's absolutely the collaboration with the scientific community, and then with the community as a whole, that's required. Yeah. So we are seeing great results because of this one step that we have taken towards geographical information systems and its mapping. Yeah.
Yes, Rohan.
Yeah, I think let me just come back with, because she was speaking about the GIS and the remote sensing part. Because of course we do, because I was a lecturer at the University of Colombo on Faculty of Technology. So we of course the curriculums are now incorporate this climate change module, the disaster management modules, and also having this remote sensing and GIS, and also we call frontier technologies, the AI, ML, and the deep learning, the spectrum. So again, now of course we do speaks about AI and ML, machine learning, and the deep learning. I'm just a little bit wondered, do we have enough human resources or the capacities being developed to take forward the things that we were discussing here? Now that's a huge gap in Sri Lanka when it comes to innovative use of technology. Now, as I said, now everybody speaks about AI and using of smart, climate smart agriculture. Now even when you say climate smart agriculture, it has different aspects. Now there are, we speaks about the use of vertical agriculture, we speaks about precision agriculture. All these things needs a lot of AI and ML and DL technology. But of course there are certain companies are already in this particular use of this AI and ML and also the other remote sensing technology to increase their yield and the productivity and the efficiency of their labor. So I think all these things are initiated in the country, but we need to know how we are going to sustain these systems. We can start, but after starting and then if it is not continue, we are after 2 years, then we should not invest on those things, because it's a waste of money, money as well as the time as well as the human resources. So you need to understand all this. So I'm glad that you have brought this AI technology into address the triple planetary crisis. Of course, everybody speaks about this. So that's something that. But let me just come back again about to when you say about technology, we also need to understand the technology in terms of capacities of the country, because we may not able to launch a satellite, okay, but we could have used the service providers who are providing all these information freely. Of course, if you want to detect the forest change in the country, you can easily download from the service providers who at global level. Everything is free now. Of course, the issue is you don't know where these information are, and you don't have the necessary human resources to acquire those information which can easily available. For me, I always use all these data. For me, nobody says I don't have data. I do have data. It's too much of data. But we do not analyze the data. Sri Lanka is a laboratory of data. Remember, we have like our climate data starts in 1800. We have like 200 plus year of data, but we never analyze. Everything is still in the archives. So those things also need to be looked at. So technology is a vast subject, but we need to understand how are we going to use the technology. Otherwise, it will become a knife with two edges. So we have to be very carefully used it. Thank you.
As we are almost at the end of our conversation, I want to bring it back to land restoration. Now, the UN is pushing companies and recommending companies to really improve investments in terms of land restoration, which is going to not only help the ecosystems but also help communities, alleviate poverty and all of this. This sounds really nice, sounds very ambitious, sounds promising, but if I ask you, how easy or how difficult is it in practice? Palinda, can I start with you?
Okay, so land restoration, though you consider it like very easy, it's just a term, but when you think about in detail, you hardly can find out an exact solution, but you can go around when we talked about the corporates working, like when you mentioned last time regarding the corporates getting involved, land restoration as well as conservation. Now we have a load of university students who have already passed out and then have done science backgrounds. Now for corporates, I'll give you an advice. Look into them, find them and get them involved in your sustainability scope in your company. If you have sustainability, if you don't have sustainability, this is a place where you, not only you, the ones who have already passed out from universities, this is a chance for you to shine out, go to them, find out areas where they could be doing activities, and then even if you're a company who is selling something, you might have something towards the sustainability and corporate responsibility. It should be it could be community, could be environment. So that way you can meddle around, find grounds where it is related to the corporates, bring it up to them. They will be highly likely supporting you, maybe in terms of small term projects, or maybe you getting recruited into the entity doing a long term research. So that also is kind of a thing which you can inculcate into the government and also towards the systems where you get educated. Now if you take about the question which you raised, now is it easy to do it, land restoration? Some of the companies will be taking down lands which could be unproductive, but just imagine you take down an area to do a program or maybe building infrastructure. As soon as you remove that, what's the first to come? That could be invasive species. We talk about so much of non-native plants and also animals. I'll talk about plants because it's the land which we are talking about. Think about Yala. Think about Udavalava. Udavalava is covered with lantana, Gandapana you call it. If you talk about Bundala, you have Kalapuandara, Prosopis, and then cactus. And if you think not just land covers which we think about, from Colombo, if you go anywhere around the country, excluding some of the areas which is extremely high in harsh climate conditions, you have greeny grass. We call it mana. It's totally covering our whole ecosystem, and you might be doing a removal of a non-native area and then maybe introducing a site where you want to do property or an activity, but that might be a good place where you have all these invasive species taking over and then having so much of destruction. And also we talked about agriculture. Now agriculture will be putting so much of you can't call it pollutants, everything from nitrates to phosphates. What happens when you put over? If you have a threshold value which you can feed the agriculture crop, that will be absorbed. What happens to the rest? That goes into the water streams, that goes into the rivers, makes algal blooms. There is fish and animals dying, and then if you go into the riverine ecosystem, passing it to the sea, there is corals, which we think about, and then corals could be covered with algae, which might kill the algal coral reef ecosystems. And now we have climate change. We have so much of temperatures. Last year, 2023, was considered an El Nino year, which had so much of stress on our coral reefs. And following that, even this year, we have a huge temperature fluctuation. So we have heat waves, which is again damaging those ecosystems which are crucial. It's not just the coral reefs where we think about, it's the feeding grounds of fish. That might affect humans in return. So you need to think about the story, it's a cycle. So sometimes what you do might trigger something else which might be totally devastating. You might have thought about a good practice which you are doing, but It's always about the coalition, and also land restoration is okay, land restoration is possible. You need to get involved with the immediate communities. You need to get involved maybe with the Veda population, like the indigenous communities. So you might be thinking in a very short way and an easy answer, but you might make conflicts when you start doing those. So then again, I connect you to the earlier stage which I taught you about. Getting involved in these youngsters who have passed out from universities, get them do research, do studies, and then get the experts. And when you have that component in your company, you might be sufficient enough to stand out and make a statement. It's not just the carbon. It is carbon, and then climate change is driven by carbon. But if you think about what is the most potent greenhouse gas, though it's not a gas, is water vapor. 50% of the global, the condition which we want to support to thrive the globe is done from the sunlight coming from solar radiation, getting trapped into water vapor and then heating up the ecosystem. If you take that, you might be 5 degrees minus Celsius, which you can't stand. So it's all about the system, and then carbon dioxide is also there. So you need to manage that also, and then so you need to think it in a broader manner. It's not that
easy.
It's not that easy.
Shanez, if I ask you, I'm not going to ask you if it's easy or hard, because I think we've established that.
I want to say that I don't think it's that easy, for sure, like Palinda said, because we've done it, and I can give some insights from a experience that we've had. I think all of you would have heard about the cinnamon rainforest, close to Singaraja rainforest, just 30 minutes away from it. It's a perfect collaboration, and why I'm saying this is private sector, government, and there is the forest department, and then we had Rukrakagano, JKH all coming together just to look at 59 acres of degraded land. And now we are like third year in making of this, and over 20,000 native trees have been planted. Now again, I hear everyone saying the scientific process must be looked at. Yes, we had scientists involved. We had a baseline study done, etc. So just to add to what you're saying, right, I think efforts are being done by the private sector. But it's important that the organizations understand that biodiversity conservation, land restoration should be a part of their business goals, their objective, strategic goals, etc. Because if you do that only, you can mandate resources and drive it from within. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to add, Rohan.
Thank you very much.
I see it from a corporate angle, corporate sustainability angle. I think it's not that difficult. I think Palinda scared, I think some of the companies a little more than, in my opinion, they should. I don't think it's that difficult, but actually, speaking of, I know the Cinnamon project, and we have a similar project, 50-acre degraded land restoration project that we do with MAs, HEMAS, Selinco, and One Tree Planted. And there are some other partners as well who volunteers. And we've been doing this. This is probably, now I'm not comparing, but this location that we do has about a 70 degree, if not 60 degree of an angle on a mountain area that's been burned down twice every year is what we are restoring. So in terms of the project, I know the difficulty. It's very, very difficult. It costs a lot of money for labor, the infrastructure, even to take a plant all the way up to the mountain by foot, itself is so challenging. So it's very difficult. It's not an easy job. But venturing into restoration is not that difficult. But I just want to move beyond the corporate restorations to whether restoration, land restoration is an easy job or not. And can it be done? And is it feasible? if we look at, like I mentioned, we have 30% of a protected area network in the country. If we look at our agricultural lands, we have 63% of an agricultural land area out of the total land area in this country. That's as per the Land Use Policy Planning Department of Sri Lanka. It's not my words. So you can see their publication. So if you have 62 to 63% of a agricultural land area, why do you need more lands for agriculture? And out of the 62% of our agricultural lands, only half of it is being used productively. Now you have another 30%, more than 30% of an entire land area of this country that are not being productively used. So the government's target is to restore 3% of a forest cover by 2030. Now there is a 200,000 hectares of a reforestation challenge, which is called the Bond Challenge, that the government need to achieve by 2030. Now this Bond Challenge will be achieved by the corporate that are doing the reforestations, the environmental organizations that are doing the reforestations, and the government-led reforestations and restoration initiatives. And in my opinion, this 3% is no way enough. I think we have quite a big possibility of going for 40% of a forest cover, or if not land restoration, if not 40% of a land area that are being preserved, by utilizing some of these unproductive and unused agricultural landscapes and ensuring the productivity improvement of the existing agricultural lands. And one final thing, in terms of restoration, it's when you say land restoration, one might feel it's just the forest landscapes. No, there are other landscapes that can also be taken as land restoration, because if you have a reservoir full of Japan Jabara, for instance, that's a land restoration also. Now Japan Jabara is a fantastic material for bag making and lot of other manufacturing that is possible. Which company of this country is trying to invest some money on using some of these invasives, which Palinda spoke about? Invasives itself by definition is not something that is bad. That's wrong way to look at it. Invasives can be really productive in terms of many things. Japan Jabara, for instance, can be used for fertilizer, bag making, as a fiber, and as many other uses. So it's just one example I wanted to bring out, because I met a few ladies who are actually using Japan Jabara for bag making and all of that. So these are actually truly good restoration investments that the companies can make. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes,
Let me just bring another aspect on this land restoration and also to address the land degradation in the country. Now there is another issue in Sri Lanka, the waste management, which we actually forgot to discuss. Of course, the waste management is a huge issue in the country, and that's why one of the major polluter because of the unmanaged waste. Now, in the same time, we need to understand the garbage of Sri Lanka is almost like wet. That's another issue. Of course, we have a plastic and other non-degradable waste management issue, but there is an issue of wet garbage management as well, because wet garbage and all these garbage are put it into the lands, or we are using it, use our wetlands or other areas as landfills. So that's another issue. So of course I do understand waste water treatment, waste management of the big hotels, because I was a hotelier earlier before 2004 tsunami. So I remember we were trying to develop waste management, water management, water treatment plants, waste management in-house. So the corporate sector has a opportunity within their system to engage in reducing the triple planetary crisis. We are coming back to the square one again, but anyway, there are small things that we can adopt easily within in-house. Of course, I'm not speaking only about the corporate, but of course we can start it from the home. How much of wet garbage we are throwing out every day? Just imagine how much I used to sometimes calculate mentally the amount of wet garbage we are throwing out every day. It's huge. So of course at the end of the day it will again contribute to global warming, because you are putting methane out. You are putting your problem to someone else's land. You are not. You may be quite okay, but you are throwing the problem to someone else's land. Someone else's land belongs to our environment, the biodiversity, the ecosystem. That's the issue. So we need to look at all these things in a different manner, and also we need to look at. I'm not calling it out of the box, but you need to look at the problem in a different. And also remember, we should not only speak about the problem. As I always say to everybody, now it's time to discuss the solution. Now let me finish my input by giving this. Now when you wanted to provide a solution to climate change or the triple planetary crisis at country level, the solution start with policy and planning based solutions. There should be policy and planning based solutions. The second one is the infrastructure based solution. The third one is ecosystem based or the nature based solution. The fourth and final, the most important solution is climate financing solutions. So those four need to be, whatever the solution should will, of course it will be interconnected. All these four solutions need to be addressed by the government, the corporate sector, the non-state sector, or the civil society and the non-governmental organization, and also the citizens of this country. We are responsible. At the end of the day, that's why I said it's our problem. It's not environment problem. So we are the people who made the climate change. So let's try to address as in consultation of all the stakeholders and network together to address the problem. So that's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been delightful talking to each and every one of you, and thank you very much, Jayantha Wijesingha, Earthwatch WWF Climate Champion and co-founder at Rainforest Protectors Sri Lanka. Thank you, Jayantha. Thank you very much, Rohan Cooray, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management Specialist and Consultant to ADB. Shanez Wijesingha, Vice President of Quality Assurance, Health and Safety, Sustainability and Data Privacy at Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. Thank you. And Palinda, thank you very much for being here. Specialist Corporate Responsibility attached to Rockland Distilleries. It's been lovely having you all. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us. Until next time, take care.